Welcome, everybody. Glad to be back in chambers. I'm going to go ahead and have our invocation. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you guide and strengthen us to make sound financial decisions for this county. Lord, be with all those that are sick, those who've lost loved ones during these tough times. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right,
Amen.
Mike Folks.
Here.
Tracy McDaniel.
Here.
Tim Spencer. Wade Lee.
Here.
London Dawkins.
Here.
David Smith. Here. Charles Mathis.
Here. Did we hear Mr. Spencer?
Yes, he did.
Okay. All right. I get a motion to adopt the agenda. Motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. And Tim, you can say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Good. All right, now we're going to listen to Mr. Bratton in regards to the 2021 budget year.
Thank you, Mr. Little. As you all know, we've been working on this budget. Mr. Leeser and I have for quite some time. Started having meetings back in February. Our budget packets went out to our department heads in January. Of course, that was before the world as we knew it stopped. We've had to shift gears in a major way over the past several weeks, actually over the past couple of months, as to how we've approached this budget. What I'm going over with you today is how the budget sits as of May the 18th. There's still some tweaks that are happening within the budget. I wanted to bring you all up to speed to see what your take on some items were, let you all see the requests that have been made, and then as things continue to progress on our side and we gain more and more information, then we can make some better, more sound decisions. But I wanted to tell you where we currently are. As of right now, the budget stands at $26,602,355. The budget in the current year is $26,411,654. It's an increase of about little over 1%. That's holding it pretty tight, as what we've tried to do. Let me tell you what's not in the budget. There are no cost of living increases in this budget. There is no tax increase in this budget. Those are the two biggies that I want to be able to be sure that you all know and that the public is aware of also. What is included in the budget are some things that we just don't have an option on. There is a health insurance increase that has been passed by the state or that has been requested by PEBA for the state to approve. That's a 7% increase. Health insurance premiums increase in January. So what we've got in here is the equivalent of 6 months of that. So keep in mind that is only for employers. The employees will not see an increase in their premiums. That's what's been asked by PEBA at this point. Currently, that cost to us is an additional $70,000 in our budget. The budget also includes an increase in liability insurance. We've seen a significant uptick there. It's $51,000 that's included in this budget. There's a couple other things that we're waiting on to come in there. That number may actually increase a little bit more. So just be aware that that's being passed along to us from the Insurance Reserve Fund. And then the biggie for us is there is a 1% increase in the employer retirement contribution as mandated by state law. As you recall, I think this is the 4th year into this, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Leeser? I think they approved 4 years ago to start increasing the employer contribution by 1% a year as part of their efforts to fix the state pension system. It's going to take a lot more than that, but they have, this is in the 4th year of it. They're doing that over 5 years. Now, with them being the folks in Columbia, with the state legislature passing a continuing resolution so far, that will be delayed. But they have already told us through the Association of Counties that we can anticipate once the budget gets passed that they would expect for that 1% to go into effect then. So we have included that in this budget. That is an additional $112,000 that is added into the budget as it stands currently. So while we may have some reprieve for the first couple or few months of this, we anticipate that coming into play at some point when they do eventually pass a budget in Columbia for the state. The other thing that is in here that it did not include in your memo, and that we will talk about in more detail as we get to it. As you all recall, the sheriff came before this council back in December and then again in January and requested some significant salary increases for his departments. And you all at that time told him that we would consider that as part of the budget process. So what I have done is included in this budget a $2,000 increase for road deputies, and there are 24 of those, for when they receive a certification. So when they hire a deputy off the streets, let's just say I decide I want to be a deputy and I have no law enforcement training, he hires me, starting salary $16.53 an hour. What I have got in the budget now is once I go to the police academy and I pass that academy, then I would get a $2,000 a year bump. The same holds for detention officers, and that is for, except the bump is $1,500 rather than $2,000, and there's 21 of those detention officers. The total cost of those two things, including fringe, is $100,000 roughly in the budget. So that is also included in this budget.
Let me ask you, since we talked about that,
Steve, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Spencer.
Steve,
Yes, sir.
you said they starting out at 1633 when they pass the academy. What's that going to put them at hourly?
that's the same, we're speaking in two different languages. Some people want to talk about an hourly wage, some people want to talk about a salary wage. So after the $2,000 increase, what we're going to put them at hourly, so we understand both people's conversations.
It is an 89-cent per hour raise. So that would be, shoot, if I can get my calculator to work,
1749,
1742.
1742.
$17.42 per hour. It'd be what they would go to at that point. And if you take $17.42 per hour times the 2,236 hours a year, that puts their salary at $38,951 per year.
Is that starting pay going to be comparable to other industries around here?
Yes, sir. That starting pay is very comparable to other counties our size. As you recall, the city passed an increase. Their starting pay actually is significantly less than ours, and their bump that they get when they pass the academy, I believe, puts their pay at $16.87. So ours would go to $17.42, which would be more than the city's. Not that we're competing with them, but we do attract from the same pool of candidates. So, but it also compares favorably to other law enforcement agencies around the state. Now, if you want to look at a Greenville County or somebody, when you're comparing apples to oranges, and they're significantly higher, well, not significantly higher, they're about $40,000 a year starting off. So it's not a bad difference between $38,950 to compared to that $40,000 in Greenville, seeing as how it's 50 miles away. So I do have that in the budget as a discussion, as a point of discussion. As we go through here, that's something that we can discuss further, or if y'all think of other questions, then we can certainly address those at that point. But there are no other raises across the board in this budget.
That's not a raise.
Well, it's not a raise, but it's a bump for a
But
certification.
Based upon most counties and municipalities in this state, they have always given basically a position once you're established from the starting pay. And that's what we're creating here. Is that not correct?
And we do the same thing in 911. You're right, Mr. Little.
But this is our first time moving this for the deputies. We've
Correct.
always kept that same pay. So this is a position move.
Correct.
Based
It is
on-
not a raise truly in that sense of the word.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And I would, I'm just gonna go back and remind Mr. Bratton and Mr. Blazer both, since the finance director, that that's probably something that we need to look at every 2 years, because if we don't, you've got other departments around you that are moving that salary range, and you're gonna end up having the same issue where our department is now falling behind these other departments because of 2 or 3 year range. I mean, something we need to look at. Any law enforcement or any position you have that has a certification, building code inspection or whatever, you have to keep up to date at least every 2 years of what your other surrounding departments are doing. So where we're gonna lose those people for $1 on the hour because we have living hours left. I was just reminded that, let's look at it at least every 2 years, no more than 2 years.
And Mr. Folks, we had that request this year actually come from the assessor's office where they have the same situation, and also from the building inspector. The building inspection office had the same situation, and we have a hard time recruiting in that area specifically because that is a very tough certification to get as far as a building inspector. So we'll make note of that, and we will continue to look at that throughout this budget, but also make notes as we go back and look back at our notes from last year as to what we did and things that we tried to incorporate this year. Of course, a lot of that's been put on hold. I had a lot of initiatives that I was going to bring to y'all this year that we've just pressed the pause button because we know we can't do it. If it's okay with everybody, I'll start going through the revenues just so we can.
Mike, pull your mic down so Tim can hear you.
Yeah, 'cause I didn't hear nothing he said. Thank you, Quay.
We're working on it.
Yeah, everybody needs to talk into their mics when we speak tonight. All right, as we look at the revenue page, I'm not going to go line by line. Our fee in lieu of tax figure is actually going to be up this year. That's a number that we feel good about. So that's certainly been a help to us. The next line is local option sales tax, property tax credit. I've held the line on that right now. The county auditor and I, Mr. Bishop, met this morning early and are discussing that. Again, as I mentioned to you all in the over the last several meetings, my concern has been us not being able to accurately predict how much we're going to bring in for local option sales tax. And this is the amount that we give away every year, or not give away, but we give credit to the taxpayers on their tax bills. And if the local option sales tax numbers are not coming in at the rate that we expect them to, then we could give away more than we bring in. So it's important that we get that number as close to right as we can. And so when we look at that number, if we start talking about reducing the credit that we gave this year, then the fear is that you effectively increase taxes without actually raising the millage. Because if you're giving a smaller credit than what you were giving, people are going to pay more even though you didn't raise the millage. So that's a concern there, and that's a number that we're continuing to look at and massage as we go through this process. To date, we have received sales tax revenues through April, but the check that we receive in April for sales taxes is actually for February sales. So that was before the world kind of changed on us. So we're anticipating receiving the May check sometime this week, and that will tell us, that will be for the March sales. And as you all recall, March 16th is when things really started to spin and things started to shut down. So that's going to give us a small glimpse, but then it will be further into June before we will know exactly how bad April's sales were.
Because April, I mean, the whole month was.
April's
kinda
when
shut
you had
down.
the outlet mall shut down for a month. You've had Hamrick shut down, just to name a couple of local businesses. Restaurants, the Big E, numerous things that have been shut down during that time. So the question is how much did Lowe's and Walmart and the big box stores that were booming during this time help make up that shortfall? So we won't know that until June. And even then, we won't have a true picture, because if you recall, the governor gave an extension for all businesses to file their sales tax and any tax return. So we're only going to know what's actually been filed. And I was at a meeting today. There's a task force that's been formed. It's called Reignite Cherokee, of local businesses and area business leaders and some from different industry. And I can tell you, people have struggled, restaurant-wise and others. It's just not a pretty picture, as you all know. But we've been fortunate here that it hasn't been as bad as in other places, but still, our businesses have struggled. So keep in mind that number is going to be impacted, and that number certainly will not go up. It could only go down, and as it goes down, then so will it will affect some other parts of this budget. The next line item is taxes. We have held the line. I have not anticipated any increase in real estate taxes. I don't know about that one yet. We should have some increase there, but we don't have an accurate picture of that yet. Mr. Bishop and I are still talking about that, and Mr. Leeser. We did not increase any line item in this budget except for delinquent taxes. We've increased it by $50,000. Watercraft is now shown separately. Used to be rolled into vehicle, but now due to a change in state law, boats are taxed differently than they've ever been taxed. Coming on down, license and permits, another toughie. Building permits. As you all know, the building industry has done very well over the past several years. We just don't know how to anticipate what's going to happen there. We had budgeted $235,000 this year, and I can tell you that through the end of April, we had already received $296,000 in building permits fees. So we've had a good year this year, but we just don't know whether or not that will continue, so we have left that number where it is. If you come on down, state aid, that is the local government fund. We have left it frozen at $2,306,549. That number was in the original version of the budget that came out. We were going to receive $2,423,263, so another $117,000. But due to the state passing a continuing resolution, they've told us that they didn't know whether or not they were going to be able to do that or not. So statutorily, we should receive $2.4 million, but due to the situation, we just don't know that we will receive that. So we've left it at 2.3, at exactly where it is in the current year, which is where they advised us to leave it, they being the Association of Counties. One increase that you may see is election, reimbursed election expense. Keep in mind it's an election year, November 2020, so the elections are going to proceed as usual. At least that's the plan currently. We get reimbursed from the state for that. So most of that is for poll workers and election expense. So there is an offsetting expense for that increase for that increase on the revenue side. There's an offsetting expense on the expense side.
Whoa. You doubled that from 1819 to
Yeah, because there's no election in 1819. It's in line with what we normally get in an election year, Mr. Little.
1819 wasn't an election year?
Not a general election year, no, sir. Not a presidential election year, I'm sorry.
Still a gubernatorial?
The 16, the 20, the 24, if you go back and look,
Every
it is
even year
more
is
than double.
election year.
Here's the point, though, Mr. Little, is this.
I don't-
Whatever, it's an offset either way. Whether
Okay,
if
as
I
long as
put
all
$1 million
I'm saying
in
is
there, it'd be fine.
I don't want you to double it and it not be true.
That's based on what we did in 2016, Mr. Little.
Okay.
And then looking back at 2012, it's similar to that also.
Right.
Let's see, the school resource. Coming on down, trying to figure out if there's any other things I need to mention to you on revenues. One thing that we've held constant that we just don't know where it's going to come in is magistrate fines. As you know, there's not been a jury trial in the state of South Carolina since March. So there's been a big delay on courts, so we're worried about that one. At some point, that's got to be made up. That number right there, we've held constant. We haven't increased it, which we didn't increase it last year either. So that number has been held constant at where it was. And if you come on down, Title 4D, it's on the transfer end near the bottom, near the end of the revenue section. We're increasing and anticipating an increase in those costs. That number comes from Brandy gives us that number, so there's been some changes in the way things are done. So we anticipate seeing a transfer in of about $80,000 more than we had in the past. All of this works out to what we're anticipating is dipping into reserves by some amount of money. What I'm hoping you're going to be looking at is about $1.5 million, possibly up to $2 million. But right now, that's where we sit on the revenue side. I'll go through the expense side, and we'll go through it in a little bit more detail as to how we balance this. But let me just assure you that we didn't just take the scissors out to cut this budget on the expense side. We got the bush hog out. It's been rough. But that's the revenue side. Have you got any questions on that side?
That's the bottom line, 1.5.
That's what we're aiming for right now, Mr. Little. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Go over to tab 3. The first sheet that you'll see that's sideways is just a by department summary. The blue column is the salary budget for the upcoming year. The orange or whatever that middle color is the operating, and the green is the total budget per our recommendation. After that, you'll find each department's line item request. Now, the reason vehicle maintenance looks so different is because, if you recall, we basically did away with that department when we contracted that out to Vector. And so, therefore, the cost that is plugged in down on line 620 is their contract for the upcoming year, plus a few other small little items such as insurance on the buildings and so forth. I'm not going to go through each and every department. I'm going to flip on over, and I'll point you to a page number as we get there. If you'll go over to page 9, under Central Services, one of the things I'll point you to is the third line from the bottom web page. One of the things that I discovered very quickly is that our web page had not been updated since 2015. I've got a price to upgrade it of $21,000. Now, you may be saying, well, is now the time to do that? It actually is. We've steered folks to that website so much over the past 2 months. It revealed to us that our website wasn't easily navigable. So we're asking that we upgrade that. That price actually came from the Palladian Group, who did our marketing for us for the Gaffney Fire referendum. If you turn over to the next page on line 620, the second line from the top, I've also included an $18,000 fee there, or a budgeted item there. And what that is a $1,500 a month social media campaign. As you all know, we do not have a presence on Facebook. We've got what Delisa Coggins and I try to do on Instagram, and it is very primitive at best, as her and I, our capabilities on that are limited. But we need a social media presence, and this whole virus has exposed our ability to communicate quickly with our public. We've been very fortunate that I was able to reach out a couple of times to local media and ask them to put some things out. For example, just in the normal course of operations, 911 lines went down one night. I'm on the phone with Mr. Sossman and Mr. Martin saying, please put on your Facebook page that our lines are down, and that was at like 10:30 at night. Actually, I think I talked to Larry. Larry had just gotten back from a game, and he was actually in the office. So we need to be able to push information out quickly and through social media. As you all know, Facebook and Instagram is the way to go. We certainly don't have anybody on staff with the time or the expertise to do this. And what we would get for this is a very professionally done they would three updates a week automatically. They would do those a week in advance to where I would know what's being posted on Facebook a week in advance for the next week. We would be able to focus on certain things around our community and around our county that we need to. So it's going to be vital. It's going to be a very good tool to sell the county and to promote the county in addition to these times that we're in now. So just say you've got a church. I remember, Mr. McDaniel, in your district, you had a church celebrate a 100-year anniversary some time back. It'd be nice to be able to do that on our Facebook page and recognize some things like that across our county, in addition to recognizing maybe employees and some other things that we should be doing that we currently are not able to do.
Who gives them that information?
That would be something that would be coming from us. We would
So
actually.
They wouldn't update on their own.
No, they would not update that on their own. And then, of course, I would have the ability to where if I had to put something out, I would be able to go in and make a post immediately to where if we needed to put word out about 911 lines down or something. So we
You're
would
the
have control of it.
24/7.
Sir?
You're the 24/7.
Right.
If something needs to be done.
Correct. If we need to post something, we would certainly have the ability to do so. But as far as canned type promotional things, recognizing people, recognizing things in our county, putting out that we've got a council meeting, maybe putting out our agenda or anything like that, we could get that to them. They would do that in their pre-planned stuff, but we would certainly still have control over it. One of the reductions I made is we've always budgeted money for grant matching funds that may come up. I've reduced that from $100,000 down to $50,000. So it's one of the cuts I made to try to get this thing in balance. As we go forward, if we go over to page 12, Administrative Building Complex, line 374, Security Expense, I have doubled that line. And I'd mentioned a while back, you all approved some additional funding for the courthouse and the law enforcement center for some security. And this building is in desperate need of security measures as well. As you know, we've got Veterans Affairs in this building. We've got probate court and various other departments that are subject to, well, the whole building, anywhere is subject to security concerns nowadays. But what I'm requesting that you all do is allow us to hire another security officer who would be a roamer in this building and who would actually be in the probate court for any time they're having court. And what we had envisioned is hopefully putting a metal detector in this building also to where people would have to funnel through a metal detector, but that metal detector is only as good as us having somebody there to run it. So we need 2 people in order to have security throughout the building and also someone running the metal detector. So that has been put into the budget. What else have we got in here? On page 13, under economic development, we've been putting aside $100,000 a year for various reasons over the past 4 years now for economic development. I've removed that $100,000 for this upcoming budget. As you all know, we passed the Infrastructure Development Fund earlier this fiscal year, and that's certainly going to do wonderful things for this county. So we've got about at the end of this year, I think we'll have $500,000 sitting in the Economic Development Fund that is part of the general fund balance that's earmarked for economic development. So in order to help balance the budget this year, I removed that $100,000 appropriation in this budget. It's something I would certainly like to put back in the upcoming budgets, but for this year's budget, in order to make everything work, we did remove that. Over on page 20, one new position that is in the budget that is desperately needed is a part-time permit clerk in the building inspection department. As you all know, we've had some significant turnover in that office, and keep in mind that office consists of our certified building official, 2 building inspectors, and property maintenance officer, code enforcement officer, whatever you want to call him, and Scott Ellis, who is our permit tech. our two building inspectors and our code enforcement person is out of the building all day, every day. So that leaves Dale, our building official, and Scott. Dale is having to be out of the building a lot because we have been so green on the building inspection side, and we've had so much turnover. Also, like right now, we're looking for a person, so we only have one building inspector and Dale who are certified to inspect. So we're in need of having a part-time permit clerk in that office. I've got that plugged in. Total price on that is $16,900 plus fringe. So I think the total cost on that is about $21,000. That includes the fringe. Of course, that is no retirement or anything on there. It is part-time. Or no health insurance, I'm sorry, it would be retirement included.
1,300 hours. We'll put it there.
Tax assessor on page 21. Actually, it looks like there's a new position budgeted, but there's not. There was a temp position that's been moved up. And so there's no new additional staff in that budget on the tax assessor side.
Can we go back to the building inspector?
Yeah.
Explain to me why we need another reception up there?
Well, it's not really a reception.
What you gonna have?
It's a maintenance tech. It's a certification that Scott Ellis has currently. They keep up with all the codes. If somebody calls in and says, "Hey, what have I got to have for this?" He knows it. Any of you who's dealt with him knows that he's jam up. He's pretty good at what he does. But he's out. If he has to be out of the office or whatever, we have no coverage in that office. It's very difficult for us to keep coverage in that office.
We can't write this down on a piece of paper when somebody calls in for somebody to read off? Because I'd be more in line with you having a second security guard that went up there and helped out with regards to that instead of a whole new position.
It's not, you can't write that down on a piece of paper, Mr. Little, because it could go 1,000 different directions based on what they're trying to do. There's just not, it's not something that you can go have a piece of paper and look up. Scott's been doing that for years, so he knows that
I understand, but
code pretty well.
We're in such tight times, and we're doing everything we can do. That to me, I mean, you can call back or you can talk to someone. To put in a whole new position or a part-time position in that office, I can't sit here and say, okay, I'm sorry. I don't know where the rest of y'all at on this, but that one hurts because we built this building wholeheartedly for the simple fact of helping one another departments out. When somebody's in need of somebody, we are in one place now. We were spread out all over the county, and that was a selling point. Do you remember that, Charles? Oh, yeah. That was my whole thing behind this building was we can go, all right, you cover this. Now, if you're going to have two security guards, I don't understand why they couldn't answer the phone and do the best they could, and if they couldn't get the exact answer to the question, then or route the phone down here to the security guard. If you're going to add another security guard, I can't see right now adding someone into that department. Now, I know I'm looking at things a little tighter than most, but y'all weigh in and tell me what y'all think, because that one's pretty.
Mr. Little, I understand what you're saying, and of course we've got to be thrifty with our money right now because we just don't so insure on revenues. That office does need some help, especially during lunch hours when Scott's out of there. I mean, and then you only have maybe Dale in there, and I've been in there many times where Dale would have several people waiting, you know, or in the middle of a permit and someone else come in just to see what they need to do to pull a permit or some, you know, whatever we would require for a permit or drawings or things like that. So there's been many times that I've been in during lunchtime or Scott's on vacation or anything like that, that we're severely short-handed, especially during the lunch hours. So I think there is some need. Whether we can do it right now, I don't know, but I think there's definitely some need there. And as far as knowledge, that position, a security guard is not going to be able to fill that position just because of the knowledge they're going to have, and the building codes and all that. I mean, classes and certifications and things like that, that person really needs to have in order to be able to fill that position, even on a part-term basis.
And keep in mind, our security guards are not county employees. They are contracted, so they're not.
That's money to a contract company.
That's
We
American
did
Security.
hire the guy. Didn't we hire him and give him a gun? What happened to that?
He became our code enforcement
Right.
person, and then we
But-
went
but
back to the
didn't we hire him
contracted
then?
employee. We went back to a contracted employee. when
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He
so I
was
missed
he
that.
was a little different. Okay,
Okay.
that was he was
So
very
that was-
capable.
Okay. I'm trying to. I'm.
It's in there.
We
for,
got plenty
for
of
thought.
time to talk
It's
about
food
it.
for thought.
I'm just throwing that out there to y'all because that's actually 2 positions we're adding. Correct? Part time.
Part-time and 1 contracted, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
And I'm not done.
No, go ahead.
If you go over to the magistrate's office, which is on page 27. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one. I'll go back to that one. Magistrate's office, remember last year where we gave 2% cost of living increases to all county employees? Magistrates are different because their salary is set by the state of South Carolina. So they do not get that 2% cost of living at the same time as everybody else. They get what the state gives. They actually get the lesser of the 2. So, actually, I'm sorry, they get the greater of the 2. So their 2% cost of living that they receive from the state goes into effect this year. So that's reflected in this year's budget, which is a 2% cost of living for magistrates that they did not get last year because their salary is set by the state. So that's reflected in this year's budget. And the other thing that's in here is we received a request that we feel like is well justified. That is to make the Blacksburg magistrate, which is Will Cobb, from 20 hours a week to 32 hours a week. There is a tremendous backlog of cases in the magistrate's office currently that Mr. Cobb or Judge Cobb can help diligently with. He is currently only scheduled for 2 weeks of jury trials for the current year, and that has to be approved through the court administration in Columbia. So we would certainly be able to request many more hours or weeks of jury trial with him. The other situation you've got over there is at 20 hours a week, they have many times where they don't have coverage in that office. I can't tell you the times that you will go over there and find that office to be closed. So it would certainly allow better coverage for that office for the folks who are going there and paying tickets. Keep in mind that Judge Cobb hears all code enforcement cases in the county. And something that we've tried to step up, and certainly Wayne Henderson in our office has written his share of tickets lately that we're waiting to get in front of a judge for. It would also give him the ability to cover in Gaffney and not have to just close up shop in Spartanburg. So if a judge is out over here, because we have so many cases going on this side, that he could come over and assist us over there. The increase in the cost in order to do that for Judge Cobb would be about $16,800 a year in order to move him from 20 hours to 32 hours. That's a recommendation that I've included in the budget. Judge Wright has asked for that, and it's astounding the number of cases that they're moving through there every year. So that is something that we have included in the budget also. Go back a page to page 25, 2 pages actually to page 25. There is a request from Amanda Walker in voter registration to move a part-time position to a full-time position, and that's Cassidy, I forgot Cassidy's last name. Cassidy Nichols in her office. Again, she runs her office on 1 full-time and 3 part-time people. And the 3 part-time people have a set number of hours that two of the part-time people have a set number of hours they can work per year because they can't make any more money. And so we have a need in there to where there's been many days when Amanda's the only person in that office. And it's just not good for our citizens to be able to not be able to walk into an office without it being closed because somebody's had to go to lunch or somebody's had to step out of their office or whatever. But also just the workload in that office has increased drastically with this new voting system and so forth. So that's a request that is also included in the budget. Also in poll workers, we are going to struggle to get poll workers this year. Amanda Walker has asked that we give a $25 stipend for poll workers for this upcoming year to include in the budget. We have got that currently plugged in. That total cost is $8,900. We are just going to struggle due to this virus, and I don't know if you all have seen what they've got to wear for the upcoming voting, but it's they look like they're walking into I don't know what. They've got a face shield, mask, gloves, so forth. So that is also included in the budget for them.
You got that as a separate line item somewhere?
It's included in the salaries.
You need to put that separate so we know that comes back out.
Well, I wouldn't take it back out, Mr. Little. We'd put that $25 in. We need to increase it anyway. It's that nobody wants to do that for what they get paid. They get paid $75 to work 12 hours. My recommendation would be to put that in and leave it in, Mr. Little. Come over to page 31, the probate court. The probate judge is just like the magistrates as far as when he gets his raise and how that works. Last year, he did not get the 2% increase, but he gets it this year. So that's included in his budget. One of the big items that I did not include in the budget is in fire protection over on page 44. We received a letter from Josh Parker with the Fire Chiefs Association, and that they had requested an increase in the direct appropriation that the county gives to volunteer fire departments from $46,500 to $50,500. That is an increase of about $47,500 a year, or about $48,000 maybe per year, and that is not reflected in this budget. What is reflected in the budget is keeping that direct appropriation at $46,500. So be aware that that request was made, but that's where it is. Come on over to page 49. You will find the sheriff's budget. Again, what is reflected is the $48,000 for $2,000 bump for 24 deputies plus the fringe associated with it. I believe that total cost for just the sheriff's office was around $60,000 after fringe. If you come on down, we've increased the fuel cost for the upcoming year. We had a problem there. We had a mistake in last year's budget, Mr. Little, actually, when the sheriff, if you recall, had asked for all these new vehicles under a lease program, and he was going to be hybrids, and he had budgeted, his budget request for his fuel had decreased a pretty good bit, so we had to bump that back up, and we actually made a mistake and left that request as he had put it in there. We've increased it by $23,000 to make it more accurate. He spends about $160,000 a year in fuel in the past. These new vehicles are a little bit better, so it's at $130 currently, or in the budget that's being presented to you. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand, but I know gas prices are down and will continue to be down.
Right. Well, and that's why I'm reduced what he's actually
I got you.
going to spend, but it's still an increase over
So-
what was in the current year budget.
So normally it's 165. So
That's
you just
correct.
took 30
That's
off.
correct.
Gotcha.
One item that has increased is K-9 supplies. Wanted you all to be aware of that. We've got 12 dogs at the sheriff's office right now. And those have been brought on through various restricted monies and so forth, but wanted you all to be aware of that we've been seeing some, you may see some increases in that particular line item. Over on page 50, you'll see contracted services software. If you recall, when the sheriff came before you all, he mentioned Zerker and the amount of that we're funding versus what was being funded out of restricted money. He also talked about mobile phones. What is reflected in this budget is fully funding the Zerker package that the sheriff uses. So that cost, the amount that we've budgeted will go from $25,000 to $43,000. I did not increase any on the mobile telephone budget. If you recall, in this current year budget that we're in now, we increased that line item by $16,300. So the sheriff asked for a significant increase there, but I held the line on that one. On the detention center side, you'll see a more accurate reflection of what food services and health services is costing us on page 52. As you recall, we entered into new contracts there, and those are going to save us money. However, those budgeted line items just have been blown out of the water for several years in a row. So we're getting those to where they're accurate in this budget and what we feel like they will actually cost us. Of course, as of this morning, we had 189 people in the jail, I believe it was, or 192. Significant decrease, and that's due to this pandemic, and basically everybody's being cut loose on PR bonds right now unless it's a violent crime. So that being said, we have shown that here in the budget as to what we anticipate that contract to cost us next year. It should be significantly less than what we've been spending. As you see, we spent $397,000 on Southern Health in the 18-19 years, and we're budgeting $355 for this coming year. We don't know at what point our numbers will go back up, but they will. So I don't want council to think those numbers are going to stay down. They're artificially lowered right now due to this pandemic, but they will go back up. We just don't know when. Emergency management. Two items I want to point to on that on page 53 is line item 642, contracted services communication. That is a system called Code Red, which is a system that the state uses. If you all recall, when we had our 911 lines down that night some time back, there was a call that went out about 11:30 that night, letting everybody know that the 911 lines were down and so forth. We had to call the state. It took us 45 minutes to get the state to approve that. We can buy that system, and a lot of counties have that system. It is a great way for us to notify our citizens of something in a hurry. Again, part of what we're wanting to do with Facebook is so we can do that, but as you all know, not everybody has Facebook, but most everybody has a phone. And what we would do is we would have a push to do a campaign to get everybody signed up for this. We'd be able to get everyone who's already signed up through the state. But this would give us a way. It's basically a reverse phone call system, kind of like the school district has for all call and so forth, but it would have thousands of numbers across the county. So we would have a very specific guidelines on what situations we use this. We're not going to push it out to invite everybody to go to a barbecue at, whatever, for little things like that, but it would be truly used for situations where we needed to use it. That's in the budget. He's also requested about $12,000 in foam and hazmat suits, which I have included. over on roads and bridges, there's a couple of line items where we've increased on road maintenance. As you all know, prices on the supplies that we're purchasing there have not going up or not going down. Those prices are going up. Those guys are struggling to keep up, and we're trying not to break the bank, but we've put a couple of small increases there. See if there's anything else I wanted to bring to your attention. One thing that I will bring to your attention is received a letter from Spartanburg Community College requesting an increase in their funding. The way we fund that is through millage, and they have requested for that to be increased. I have kind of relayed to them that I don't know if that is going to happen this year, and I know that certainly is council's decision, but they requested a 5% increase in that, and I do not, that is not reflected in this budget, any kind of increase. Real quickly, before we run out of time, that's the general fund. Again, what brought up a few things that we had added into the budget. What I didn't tell you is we've cut a bunch, and what was asked for and what our true legitimate needs in this county, we're not able to fund this year. So just so you know that's what this book is all the departmental requests, and we feel like we've done the best we could. We're trying to meet certain needs while we knew we couldn't do everything. Tab 4 for you all in your book is all the personnel changes that we received, including raises and various other items that we received. I will tell you that one of the things, just so make sure you all are aware, one of the requests that came from the sheriff, in addition to the salary increases that he brought to you all, was to take on 10 additional SROs and to take those over from the city and the town, the city of Gaffney, and from the town of Blacksburg. That cost would be probably about $120,000 to us because we would only be paying for about 3 months of that. But that is not in this budget. I did not recommend that in the budget, but I just want you to be sure that you all know that that request was made. There's many other things in here that were requested that you all can look through, and if you would like to, ask me about those privately because they are personnel related. Finally, go to tab 5, and this is the capital budget. Of all the ones that we cut the most, this one is it. Currently, there are some Microsoft Office licenses and some other things totaling about $28,000 in IT that we approved that we really don't have a choice. We've got to update those licenses in order for us to continue using Microsoft Office. The lease payment, and I hate to use the word lease, the payment to Enterprise for administration for the 11 vehicles that we acquired this year is in there at $42,000. There is currently budgeted one 2020 F-150 four-wheel drive vehicle for a building inspector. What we would do would be rotate one of the ones that they've got out of their department into someone else. They would like to have a four-wheel drive to get to some of the building sites that they go to. One of the items that's being carried over from the current year is carts for the election commission. We talked about this at one point earlier this year, but she bought 15 carts. They've got these, basically it's a big cage that rolls now, because it used to be that our poll workers could pick up the voting machines and carry all that stuff into the polling places, but now due to the size of what the state approved, they can't carry them. So we have to put those in a secured mobile apparatus that the state's requiring us to do, but we have to pay for it. So that's currently, she has the money in her budget, but we're hoping the state may come up with some funding for this, And if they do, then we won't have to spend that, but if not, then we need to have it available and budgeted to spend. There is 10 sheriff's vehicles, six sheriff's vehicles budgeted at $321,300. There are 12 tasers in there. As you all know, we have to rotate those quite frequently, and this is continuing that rotation. And also there is 23 new bulletproof vests. Those also have an expiration date, so we need to re-upfit those. We have in here a transport van replacement at the detention center. I believe the one they're replacing's got, is it 280,000? It's like 280,000 miles on it. The control operating system, that's a very important one. As you all know, at our detention center, there's a central room where they control the doors and so forth. That CPU in that whole unit needs to be replaced, and that costs us $20,000. They've been having trouble with it. They had to go manual for a while, and that is just not optimal, and it creates a safety risk. So we're recommending that we replace those. And also Axon tasers, again, at the detention center, we're recommending that we replace 8 of those. They requested 16. We recommended that we do 8 of those. Coming on down, roads and bridges, they need a tractor. Had some problems there with, it says tractor and bush hog, but it's just the tractor. We wound up just needing a tractor. And if we can do that, that will help us get by with what we need to do. That price is $80,000. And then you have a asphalt roller and a packer. We don't have one currently. Ours was sold at GovDeals some 3 years ago, prior to me arriving, so I don't know the details of it, but we need one. This is one that you can actually pull behind a vehicle that's got wheels on it, so that's what this is. That allows us to do asphalt aprons on driveways and so forth. Coming over to the next page, you'll see one garbage truck. There's been discussion of putting 2 in there, and Brian ST's asked for 2. Right now, I can only envision that we've got room to buy 1, but we can certainly continue working on that. Of course, buying 1,500 roll carts that we try to buy annually. The biggie is at the landfill, which is the compactor. We've discussed this a couple of times. Total price of that compactor is between $600,000 and $650,000. So what I've done from a cash flow standpoint is I've looked at the possibility of financing it. We would have to put $100,000 down, finance it for 3 years. The interest rate, the best interest rate I can get on any kind of equipment like that is 2.6%. That puts the payments at about $173,000 a year. So what's plugged in for this year is a $273,000. Next year would be $173,000, and the year after would be another $173,000. But that gets us a compactor. We have gone and looked at these things 2 places. So we certainly haven't settled in on what we're going to buy, but we feel really good about the particular brand that we're looking at currently. And the other thing that we need to do is we have our articulating dump truck that is at the landfill that's been broke down for quite some time. We've had 2 different groups look at it. It needs a motor. The motors for that piece of equipment is not cheap. That motor's $66,000. But we need that piece of equipment. What we're doing currently is running our regular dump truck down there about once a month. And that dump truck has to make, I think, 3 or 4 trips compared to what one in that articulating dump truck makes. And it's just, it pulls one away from roads and bridges when we have to do that. So if at all possible, we need to get that dump truck, that articulated dump truck, up and running. But again, that price for a new motor and that piece of equipment is $66,000. So the total budget right now in capital is $1,370,000. We anticipate revenue in that particular area of about $1.2 million. So we've got a little bit of work to do there. I certainly want to get that down to where we're not tapping into fund balance for capital items. So we're still looking at that, but that's kind of where it is right now. If any of you, do you have any questions on capital right now?
Mr. Bratton, it seems to me that we've had quite a bit of problems with trash trucks breaking down recently, and talked about this several times in our Public Works Committee meeting. Can you bring us up to date on what, how many trucks we have again, and how many that are running at any given time? And I was thinking that in the past, Mr. Mathis might be able to bring me up to date on that, but we've bought two one year and one the next, and several times since I've been on council on trash trucks. And we've had to do that to keep our fleet going, but I don't think in the last few years we've done that. So.
We've been buying one a year as far back as I've looked, Mr. McDaniel, but it is a constant struggle. Every morning, Brian Estes gets a text from me that says how many are running, and we have to have 9 to run the routes. For example, today we started off with 9 and we had one die on us. We didn't have a backup ready. We only had 8 to finish out the day. So that's been a struggle. These trash trucks are aging. Remember, we've got some that we acquired from the city when we took over their trash collection. We've got what we bought for several years. We've had quite a bit of problems with the particular ones that we were buying. Over the past 2 years, we've bought Freightliner chassis with Hill Packers, and they've, so far, knock on wood, they've done very well. We've currently got 2 with blown motors, 1 you all approved in our list to sell to Gov Deals. We were debating on, Brian and I have been talking about whether or not to replace the motor in one. We're trying to make it through to where we don't have to do that. So really and truthfully, we've got 14 minus those 2, we've got 12 trucks. So that means at any given time, we would hope we had 3 spares. But Vector, and I haven't given you an update on them. They are coming along. They've made a replacement at the top of that organization within our county, and we seem to be seeing some pretty good results. And they've struggled. Those trash trucks are a handful on a day-to-day basis. They just are. We just got one back 2 days ago, and suddenly the PTO stops working. I mean, and it's just one thing after another, Mr. McDaniel. I mean, as you all know.
Well, I rode up on mine in my district Friday, and they were broken down right in the middle of the road with
it's just a struggle, and those things are.
It's a constant breakdown.
It is, and they're just stop and go, and they some of ours have got a lot of age on them. So we've been doing good at one per. We'd love to be able to buy 2 out of this budget. But what's driven this capital budget for me this year is that compactor, because we don't want to get in a situation like we were in at the landfill for several weeks, where we did not have our D6 dozer. And we just feel like it's always running on borrowed time, and it's not what we need. So to buy 2 trash trucks would be a plus. And I've already told Brian that whatever council approves here on a trash truck, we're going to order it July 1. So we're going to get it ordered so that we can get it here sooner rather than later, because when we do go down to 8 trucks, we start incurring overtime at that point. And I've made that abundantly clear to Vector. They understand that that is not acceptable to us.
What sheds new light on your proposal to go to 4 days a week? Don't go to 4 days a week with these trucks breaking down.
You still get it done.
Like overtime. If you're breaking down and you're scheduling for 4 days a week, no other choice but to go overtime.
Keep in mind, we have a couple of days in there that's got some short routes in them. So we've got some wiggle room.
We're incurring overtime now, you just said, if we break down.
We do incur some.
Okay.
Because it takes time to get somebody out there.
Understand, but I'm just saying, the plan of going to 4 days, this becomes a deterrent to me, hearing what I'm hearing now.
Well, no, because going to 4 days allows us to maintain our trucks more efficiently, because it gives you a day to work on these trucks, whereas right now we don't have that day.
We
only have 2 of the Freightliners.
That's correct. We've bought one last year and one this year.
Need to establish that a little bit further before we think about it.
Well, that's certainly,
I think all of us just want to make sure that our taxpayers are serviced correctly on these trash routes and that we deliver on that.
absolutely.
And if it takes buying 2 trucks, then that's just one of those things in my opinion, we need to do, if we need 2 trucks this year.
Well, we will take that into consideration as we finish this up and prepare it to bring to you all for first reading on June the 1st. Mr. Little, that's all I've got. As you all know, we've said a lot in a very short amount of time. We could spend another couple hours talking about it, but that's where it is at this current point in time.
But in regards to this is just a presentation. The 3 readings are in June.
Correct. This is just a workshop to
Gives us
bring you up
plenty
to
of
speed.
time to talk and figure out what we need. All right, does anybody have anything else? Then we stand adjourned for this meeting.